Have you ever wondered how to take all of these TVs and hook them up on a single source? Stay tuned here on RV's Toy Box. Today I'm going to show you how. Now you're going to need a few things to get this accomplished. First, you need a source, whether that's an older DVD player, whether it's a new DVD player, but you want to look at the output. In other words, do you want to run into your vintage television's HDMI? In other words, you want to run like a Roku or something like that. You want to just run an older VCR, which is going to use the RCA plugs, the 3 RCA plugs, or the coaxial. So that's what you have to look at first, because that's going to determine what little adapter box that you're going to need to use. So if you have, for example, an HDMI, you're going to have to get a more expensive box. The HDMI boxes usually start about $50, and they go up from there on Amazon. These guys here usually start in the $20 or $30 range. Now, if you change your mind after the fact, you can get a converter that takes HDMI into the RCA, and so that way you can still, use this. You won't waste the money if you get this and decide to get the other adapter later on. But if you start out with the mindset that you want to use a unit that has HDMI as the main output of your DVD, VCR, Roku, whatever, then you want to start with that box. Now the cheapest one, like I said, is $50 on Amazon, and it's pretty fancy. It's got all kind of extra stuff, but I'll put a link to that in there. But this one's a little bit more reasonable, and it uses obviously the RCA inputs, and then it has a place for you to do input and output on this, which is obviously what's going to go into this, which is a splitter. Now, depending on how many televisions that you're going to run will determine the splitter that you use, if any at all. So let's say you just have one. So, I started out with the one big guy here, the 23-inch, I think it is. Maybe it's a 19. But I picked it up at, a vendor's mall. And I picked it up pretty cheap. It just needed to be cleaned out really good, which, for a lot of these vintage TVs, most of the time all you got to do is open them up and vacuum all the stuff out of it, and they work great, which is one of the advantages of using the older TVs. But if you're going to use more than one and have like a wall, like I have, then you're going to need a splitter. Now, super important not to get a splitter bigger than what you need. So let's say that you're running 3 TVs and you get a 5 splitter. That most of the time might be okay, but the extra ones do something called bleed off, and that bleed off will actually create interference, because here's the trick. These things are really sensitive to interference. So if you get older televisions that are pre-coaxial, you're going to need to get, you're going to need to make sure you do it right, because otherwise you're going to drive yourself insane with all the extra stuff. Now, along with that, in between, obviously, your box here and your splitter, if you end up needing a splitter, is going to be the type of cable that you use. And then you're also going to need something to plug into the back of the TV. Now I'm going to move this over just a little bit so you can see this little guy right here. And this basically hooks into the VHF connectors right here, and it's just a converter to a coaxial. They are super cheap. Matter of fact, you can probably pick up 3 of them for $5 on Amazon. They're really, really inexpensive. But this is going to be a need no matter what level, whether you whether you use a splitter or not. You're going to have that. That's the only way to hook it up to the actual older television. Now, if you're doing this with TVs, older CRT or tube TVs, and they already have a coaxial on the back of it, one, you don't need the adapter. Two, you don't need this secondary adapter. You can literally go right from the VCR and plug it right in, just like you would anything else. There's nothing extra special about a post coaxial, which is the little screw in. Obviously, this is what I'm calling coaxial, by the way, where it has a screw tip, just like cable TV back in the day used to have. So if it has that already sticking out the back, none of this really matters. You can go straight from whatever you're using, a VCR, coaxial to coaxial. If you're going DVD to coaxial, you need one adapter, obviously, to go hook into the HDMI adapter to a coaxial. But in this case in point, I'm using all much older televisions for that. Now, one of the big things I mentioned was interference. Now, that comes from a variety of things that you have to also be careful for using these pre-coaxial televisions. One of them is a cable that looks like this. These are very popular back in the day because this was like in the transition between, using the antennas like that and then switching it over to here. You know what, back in the day these were probably okay, but because we have so much stuff today that creates interference, like LED lights, if you have any LED bulbs in your room, if you have any LED strips that you're using for decorations, and even putting it too close to an LED or a modern television, these things will pick up on that interference like a magnet. And I mean, just and nothing you can do. Don't even use those. The other ones is, if you've ever had cable TV installed before, your cable TV guy, probably gave you something like this. So for, post coaxial, these are fine. These have practically no insulation whatsoever, nor do they really need it. I have 3 post coaxial televisions in my other toy box room. No interference issues whatsoever. Run LEDs next to them all day long because the resistors or the little blockers for that, they're inside the TV, so you can run almost any cable on that. But for this particular scenario, what you've got to get is something like this. Now, it looks the same. Okay, this is the same as this, just longer. It looks the same, but these are triple insulated wires. You've got to get, if you're going to use a pre-coaxial and you're in an environment where you have any LED lights, like this one back here, okay, this right here is an LED bulb. Obviously behind me, all of the lights that I've got here in my toy box for the shelves, they're all LED strips. Over here in my office, I have 9 screens. Those are obviously LED. And as you'll see a little bit later, the big TV in the middle here, as part of the display wall, it's a practically brand new TV. It's, all of that puts out enough interference for these older televisions to pick up on. So you got to use triple or quadruple, if you can find them. Get the most insulated cables that you can. Now, these are pretty inexpensive on Amazon. These are HQ line RG6 triple shielding AI shell black and white cables. And again, I will leave a link for that in the description as well. But you're going to need to have, the shorter the better. Don't get longer than you need it. But the shorter the better, and triple or more insulation there. So once you've got all of those together, you've got your source, which in my case I'm using RCA out on a little DVD player, and then that's going to go through a cable and into this box, which is going to convert it from the RCA to the coaxial. And in the process of doing that, it's going to clean the signal up. Now, this is, again, why you can't just wire it directly. You've got to use one of these little guys right here, because it modulates the signal and changes the RF frequency. Important, right? So you want to make sure you want to run one of these, and then you're going to run it from here, either directly into the TV or directly into the splitter. and then from the splitter, obviously, directly to the TVs into your little adapter, like I showed you here, that goes on the back of the television into the VHF, the 2 screws right there, and then, of course, straight into that. So let's put it all together and see now what we've got. Now, so for some of you that have seen some of the other stuff that I put together, you know I'm a stickler for cable management. I don't like to see any wires unless I don't have a choice, and anytime I see them in a video, I immediately go and try to fix it. But I've showed you these before. These are little Velcro straps that you get for monitors. They're on Amazon. I've talked about these before on putting the shelves together. It's the same thing. And they do a fantastic job of very tightly holding everything together. You can put 2 or 3 of these together. I mean, these are really good. But we're going to start down here. I'm using this little DVD player. It was super cheap on Amazon. And out of this, I'm doing it a little bit differently. I have the 3 wires coming out, which will go in, obviously, to my adapter, you know, my little RF modulator. All this will get cleaned up, obviously, when we get done. But instead of hooking the audio up, I'm actually bypassing that into an external speaker. So you have, you know, your yellow one coming out of the player, and that is coming into the, you know, the adapter. And then I have the other 2 going into a speaker. No big deal, but that's kind of how I have it set up. I like to be able to control that a little differently. And that's also a good solution if you have an older TV like this one that the speaker doesn't work. And because the speaker doesn't work, obviously, you know, it's like, hey, what's wrong? You know, you can, if you're going to use an import source like this anyway, you can bypass the speaker and nobody will ever know. So, all right, so from there, we're going to plug that into this guy right here. So we've got into white and into red, and some of you may have already turned this off by now, and that's okay. I still love you anyway. By the way, if you're liking what you see and all the different things we do here at Arby's Toy Box, make sure you hit that like and subscribe down there. Tell all your friends. I mean, we really kind of want to make this a little bit bigger with the collection that I've got and the different adventures that we go on. But from here to here, and then of course from here, I am going to plug it into my shorter cable, and then that goes into the output. Now you want these also to be tight, so getting yourself a wrench or a pair of pliers or something, once you get all of this together, you want these to be nice and snug. Now, by the way, all of these use a plug-in. They're usually 12 volts, and plugs into one of these little guys right here, and you just plug that in, plug it into actually 5 volt, I apologize, and they usually just plug into a little box that you'd use for a phone. And then from here, we're going to go into the splitter right here. Now, if you have one of these, you can buy caps. Let's say you only end up using 2 of these. You can buy caps to cap off the ones that you're not using. Now, that's if you're getting a bunch of extra interference in on this, and you can cap those and keep it from bleeding off. But it's just going to go into the end right here. And again, when I get done with this, I'm going to tighten everything up really good. I'm also going to hang this on the wall. You know, I'm going to put that, use these 2 holes, make it really nice back behind there so everything is cut off the floor and looks very clean. And then the only thing left from here is to use one of the other cables to go from here up to our television into the adapter here. Now, I'm going to show you the adapter much more closely. This is your adapter here. And again, you can pick these up really cheap online, but it's just got the coaxial there. There we go. And you just run it into the VHF right there. And that's what allows you to adapt the antenna to the coaxial feed. All right, so now we've got our source, DVD player, coming out through the RCA cables into my RF modulator. Out of the RF modulator from there to, in this particular case, the splitter. And then from the splitter out to all the different televisions. I have this one already hooked up to my adapter up here. Now I'm going to get all the other 1, 2, 3, 4 TVs plugged in, and then we'll see what it looks like. All right, so before we put it back together, you can see where we've got the wires put in. I'm going to put these in cable ties so it's nice and clean. but we've got all the different TVs running, and even run a wire up to the big guy up here, so you just have all 5 TVs. I have 3 other smaller ones that just doing some repairs on. One of them works, it just needs to work a little better. But that's the cable management with them kind of, melded to the walls there. And of course, when the TV gets pushed back, it'll hide all of those. Now let's put everything together and take a final look. And here we go with kind of the, I don't want to say final product, because there's always room to improve. I still have to put pictures up and so forth in here, but that is how you use the splitter and a RF modulator to hook up multiple TVs and be able to have a little bit of a display wall, back like they had back in the old RCA display showrooms when you would go to buy a television or something. As for RB's Toy Box, I hope that you enjoyed this video, and of course if you did, make sure that you click like and share down there at the bottom. Maybe somebody looks to need this type of information to get your TVs hooked up. And make sure you stay tuned on our channel, and make sure you go to Facebook, RB's Toy Box. They're on Facebook and Instagram, because I do a lot of really short videos on different things that we've done and changes and so forth. And as you can tell with some of the last videos, we made some big changes in here when we moved the rooms around here at the RB's Toy Box house and made those changes. My wife wanted to move downstairs with her game room and movie theater and all that, so that moved me upstairs, and then of course opened up a little bit more room in here. But I've got a lot of new projects that I'm putting together. We were able to separate out some of the Star Trek stuff and make it a little bit more isolated. Some of the vintage items and so forth, and make them more isolated, so we can kind of free up some room and expand out some different stuff. Plus, we picked up some new stuff. I got some videos coming with Carl, Steve, and Little D, which would be 2 Stormtroopers and Darth Vader coming up as well. But to all of those that are out there watching RB's Toy Box, stay tuned.